Hey, everybody out there in Progress Report land, this is the Progress Report. If it's Wednesday, if it's 7 p.m., it's time for the Progress Report, as it's been for almost a decade. Normally, I have a good friend sitting here. This being the first Wednesday of December, it would be Lou D'Alessandro, but he told me he's in Puerto Rico. Oh, Lou, we feel so bad for you, but as we look at the snow out there, and otherwise it would be Mike Farley. But that's nothing to be discouraged about, because tonight I have one of the outstanding people in New Hampshire to be my guest, and that is Andrew Volinsky. Andrew Volinsky, probably most people that watch this show will know this, but Andrew Volinsky is one of the premier lawyers in the state of New Hampshire, and that's just one of his accolades, because he is not only a top lawyer in the state of New Hampshire, he's also an executive counselor, serving his second term representing the interesting district that goes all the way from Vermont
to Maine.
Maine.
Yes.
A little bit of gerrymandering caused that, but it worked out for Andrew, because if you're a Democrat, you're going to be very likely to be the executive counselor for that district, and Andrew has been for 2 terms. But more than that, over a long and distinguished career as a lawyer, an advocate for many good causes, including opposing the death penalty, he's probably best known for what he's done to try and right the ship of our educational public funding, our funding for public education in the state of New Hampshire, which has been held, thanks to Andrew and some colleagues of his, but certainly he's the number one guy, as being found unconstitutional, not under the federal Constitution, but under the New Hampshire Constitution, which requires that funding of public education be a state responsibility. We think it's a town responsibility, but it's really not. It's a state responsibility. The Constitution is clear on that, and Andrew has made that very clear in his advocacy in the courts and around the state, and he has gone everywhere carrying this message. And now he's seeking the highest office we have in New Hampshire. Some may argue the senators, but that's, they're just 2 of 100. Then we have one governor in New Hampshire, and then Andrew has announced his candidacy for governor of New Hampshire, seeking to unseat our 2-term governor, John Sununu, coming up.
Chris Sununu.
Chris Sununu. I'm thinking of the father, my goodness. Which will be the election we have less than 12 months away.
Right.
And so, Andrew, thank you so much for joining me on the Progress Report. It's really great to have you here.
Thank you, Bob. It's my pleasure to be here. It's good to see you.
And I think I'd like to start off by talking about what you're perhaps best known for, and you never cease to be an effective advocate for, which is our educational funding and why it's grossly unfair and why it violates the Constitution requirements we have in New Hampshire.
Well, thanks, Bob. Let me step back a half a step first, because it's relevant to why I've worked so hard on trying to give every child in the state a good opportunity for a strong education. And that's my own experience. I'm the only one in my family to have gone to college. My dad was a mechanic and a handyman, my mother a homemaker. I went to college on scholarship and worked my way through summers and through the school year. Being good at school made all the difference for me and changed the trajectory of my life. And so I really appreciate the opportunities that come from public education. And so when I was first approached to become the lead trial lawyer in the Claremont school funding case, I went to Claremont to meet everyone.
Did you hesitate at all when this call came in? Because I can imagine there were good reasons to do that.
So I guess I can say this just between us. It wasn't a call. I was asked by my friend Arpier Saunders.
Yes.
You remember Arpie?
One of them in person, yes.
We used to run together at the YMCA in Concord. And he waited till after a run when we were in the gym, in the locker room. And I may have been wearing just a towel at the time, so he had a
certain
bit of
vulnerability there.
Bit of a disadvantage. That's when I was asked. But I went to Claremont, obviously, as you know, to go meet the clients, and it was like going home. There were boarded up buildings. There were people struggling to get by. I went through the schools. I saw a lot of busted equipment in the science labs. I saw books. This was early to mid 90s. I saw books where it said, "We hope someday to put a man on the moon," which happened in '69.
Right, 50 years ago.
Yep. I learned that they were rationing remedial programs for elementary school kids. They couldn't
kidding.
provide them to all the kids who were identified. That's what I grew up with. I know what that feels like, and it motivated me from the very start. And I've not stopped my interest there.
Yeah.
Eventually, we recruited a team of volunteer lawyers of 18. We made 10 different trips to the New Hampshire Supreme Court. I led the effort on a 6-week judge trial. And we convinced the court of a couple of things. First, that education is a fundamental constitutional right to be cherished, and that it's the state's responsibility.
You know, that's actually the word of the New Hampshire Constitution, isn't it?
Cherish.
Cherish.
Yes.
You should cherish education.
Yes.
And some people think, well, that means you just have to, sing its praises. You don't have to do anything.
Right.
And
And the
that's
court
not right.
said that's not the case. The court said that because education is a state responsibility, the taxes to pay for it are state taxes, and therefore they should be uniform across the state. And we are far from uniformity in how we pay for education. 73% of education funding in New Hampshire comes off the local property tax. School funding is a math problem. So you multiply the value of the property in your community times your tax rate, and you get your money for school. So if your property is highly valuable, you can impose a very low tax rate and still raise a lot of money.
Like Moultonborough or Waterville Valley or Hollis or
So
some other communities.
So we're going to talk about that.
Let's do it.
And if the opposite is true, if you have low property values, even if you have a high tax rate, you can never catch up.
Yeah.
So to explain this, I've gone around the state with my good friend and Claremont colleague, John Tobin.
Yep. Another hero of the effort.
He's my hero, I tell you. He and I have conducted almost 60 forums in front of 3,000 people all across the state, hour-long forum explaining how school funding works.
Yep.
And to make it simple, I put together a pretty easy tool to use,
Yep.
which is back here.
Yeah, this is the famous big stick.
My big stick goes everywhere. But in this studio, my stick's a little hard to use.
Well, it's looking pretty good, actually.
It's okay?
Well, I think so. It doesn't quite go all the way to the top, but
Well, I can
How about
switch-
you? How about switching to the other one?
Yeah, so what I did for places like here is I made a smaller version.
There it is.
And here it is. And does this come out okay on your
I
screen?
think it's looking pretty good to me.
Okay, so all this stick is an explanation of the financial strength of different communities in the state, since we're so heavily reliant on the local property tax.
Right.
All right, so don't worry about these numbers, but the average strength community is the black line here. It has about $1 million worth of property against which that community can levy a tax.
Mm-hmm.
Down here in the grayish purple line is Berlin. Berlin
Yeah.
has 325,000. So
And that's so tragic in Berlin. They had to close their only elementary school, I think, within the year.
the Brown School closed last spring. So Berlin's 325, Claremont is 400,000. That's the red line. The blue line here is Manchester. So Manchester has a structural problem. It has 3/4 of the property value of an average strength community.
Really?
Yeah. So
I
that's
would have thought Manchester would be better than that with all the development and the new hotels and everything.
you're hoping to get there, but
Yeah.
this is where you are.
Yeah.
Up here at the top, remembering this is average, the green line, that's Portsmouth. Portsmouth has 2.6 million per child.
Yeah.
Moultonborough, which you mentioned, would have taken 3 sticks. So Moultonborough has over $6 million in taxable property for every child in the school district.
And I suppose everybody watching this program knows that Molten Borough is a community on the shores of Lake Winnipesaukee.
Beautiful community.
Prime property, properties in that town.
So here's how it plays out. Molten Borough has an education tax rate of $4 per thousand. Claremont's tax rate is $25 per thousand. So if you have a $200,000 house in Molten Borough, you pay $800 in school taxes each
Wow.
year. Same house in Claremont, you pay $5,000. And then the municipal side's about the same. So I said Manchester has a structural problem. Manchester also has a tax cap.
Yeah.
So you here in Manchester, because of the tax cap, don't even impose the state average in school taxes. So the state average is $12.71, I think, $12.71. The Manchester school tax is around $10. And with that, you have the lowest spending in the state
Per capita.
per child.
Per child, yeah.
In the state,
Yeah.
in Manchester,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, it shows.
Yeah.
And so this is what we talk about when we teach about school funding. The other thing, I'll just make one quick mention, the lottery. Everyone knows the lottery pays for education in New Hampshire.
Not so much.
Yeah, 2.5% of education funding comes
Yeah,
from
they
the lottery.
like to cite the lottery's overall contribution to the education of a couple of $1 billion, but that's over like 25 years.
50 years.
50 years. So it doesn't add to that
Yeah.
much in the
So
course
it's
of a particular year.
2.5% comes from the
Yeah,
lottery.
yeah.
So we've been talking about this. I tell you, it started, excuse me, in Pittsfield 18 months ago. Pittsfield was considering suing the state again, like Claremont. And I said to the Pittsfield board, you should have a community forum. Make sure people understand what this is about before you make that decision. And they announced it. 125 people showed up on a warm June night. And by the end of the forum, people were ready to march on Concord because it's so unfair.
Yeah.
This is the reason I'm running for governor. Fixing
That's
school
very succinctly
funding
put.
is
But now
my
we
highest
have now we
priority.
have a new litigation from out of Conval, right?
Yes, we do.
And talk about that. Is that just picking up where you left off, or are you involved in that, or how's it
No,
going?
as an elected official, I am the state, and so I can't be involved in suing the
see.
state. I had nothing to do with the Conval case. I heard about it when it was filed. I don't think it makes good sense to be litigating it. I think it has to be, after 30 years of working on this as an advocate, I'm convinced this is a political problem that needs to get solved through political means
So
and holding elected
you're saying
office.
essentially you've gone as far as you can with the judicial system and the legal system to try and fix this. Now you have to do it through other means, and that's part of why you're running for governor.
That's a large part.
Well, very, very good. How long ago did you start working on this?
We filed the lawsuit in 1991.
1991.
Our youngest child was in my wife's backpack, and second youngest was a toddler at the time.
And here we are, almost 30 years later? Is that right? 29 years, whatever it is. And what has been accomplished? Do you think? Do you have a feeling that? I mean, you've obviously decided this is as far as you can go with this. It's now a political problem, so you're a candidate for governor. What have you accomplished, would you say?
I think for a time, the level of state contributions to education did go up and were significantly better than when we filed the suit. But since 2000 or so, 2002, they've started slowly trending downward.
Why is that?
It's a lack of political will. Concord needs a new kind of leadership. There is an unwillingness to talk about how to raise revenue in
Yeah.
this state. It's
Yeah.
the political third rail. Governors avoid it.
Yeah.
Going to say I'm a little bit different in that I'm putting it front and center because this problem affects families with children. It's a reason why we have the fastest aging state in America.
Really?
We are the fastest graying state
Oh,
in
I
America.
thought maybe it was one of our neighboring states, but you say it's actually New Hampshire.
It's us, and Maine is second.
Yeah.
And we're a wealthy state. We're fifth in the nation in per
Yeah,
capita income.
wealth, yeah, yeah.
And we have the resources. I have friends in other states who've done similar litigation. They don't even attempt this litigation in Mississippi because there are no resources. Even if they win, they can't do anything. We're not
Do
that
they have
state.
the same kind of constitutional provision that we do that gave you the lever to make this litigation go, or not?
Most states have it in their state constitutions.
Yeah.
I don't remember Mississippi directly.
Huh.
But here's the problem. We're finding that we don't have enough highly skilled employees. So businesses are looking for employees in other parts of the country to bring them to New Hampshire,
Yeah.
which is an indictment of our school system.
Right.
And the fact that 77% of the children in our state live in communities below the black line, which means they're struggling to pay for their schools in this current system, that reduces the number of qualified employees over time.
So I'm sure you kept up with the similar litigation that's gone on in states around the country.
Yep.
Has anybody achieved more than we've been able to achieve in New Hampshire? And if so, how have they done it?
Yeah, other states have. Vermont. Vermont had the same litigation as we did at about the same time, and within 2 or 3 years put in place a solution that has held for 20, 25 years now.
Really?
Massachusetts, about the same time frame. It's been tweaked once or twice, but again, it's held. And the trick of it is to spread out the load. So this is all dependent on the property tax, and property values do differ on the lake, off the lake, on the ocean, with a ski mountain,
Yeah.
away from a ski mountain. That's natural economic activity. But if you ignore that economic difference and still rely on it, your school quality is going to be all over the place. So New Hampshire has public schools that rival some of the best private schools in the nation. And they're resource rich. They are able to adopt programs or adapt programs to individual students. They work really well, but they're too few and far between, and we can do a lot better.
So can you bring this down to Manchester, New Hampshire, which is where we are?
Yep.
And, to me, we have a new group here in Manchester, Manchester Proud,
Yeah.
which I'm very proud that they're doing what they're doing. It's a wonderful
So
thing
am I.
that they're doing. I mean, it's just stunning because they recognize that the future success of the city of Manchester, the biggest urban city we have in the state of New Hampshire, depends on perceiving and the reality being that our schools offer good education.
Right.
And how are we doing, and how can this help?
So Manchester Proud, I feel the same way about them as you do, was formed for a reason. Mm-hmm. It was formed by the business community because they were having difficulty attracting employees to the city.
Yeah, they all want to live somewhere in the suburbs and work in Manchester, and it's that's not good.
That's not sustainable. And so that group formed to facilitate investment in the Manchester public schools. And so that just underscores the direct link between schools and businesses. You need both to succeed. And I'm glad they're making the effort that they are. It's going to take, they're really working hard on what I would call the business strategy side of building a successful school system, but that will take sustained resources over time.
Yeah.
And so you let me just mention this. You have an unusual charter that gives the school board, the body that best knows the schools, no power to determine school funding.
Well, we're making an effort on that front right now.
So
And, it's a long way to go, but, the initial.
it is. You have the charter commission,
We
right?
have the charter commission. We have some aldermen and some school committee members that are anxious to see this change, which I guess the example we look to is Concord, where the school district does have funding power.
Yes.
And I like to say, New Hampshire, we have the best water in the country, or second to none, from Lake Massabesic. But guess what? They get to fund their own operations through an environmental whatever tax. Mm-hmm. So when they need to protect the watershed, when they need to extend lines, when they need to do whatever they do, they can do it, and we have the best water in the country. Why shouldn't we have that same system for our public education, which is at least as important as having good water?
Yes. I assume that was a rhetorical question.
That was definitely a rhetorical question. That's one I love to make. Okay, folks, so I think we're going to, Brandon, let's take our first break. I forgot to mention, we usually take a couple breaks so we can just kind of check in and then we'll move on.
Okay.
And folks, I want to remind you, we have an outstanding guest here tonight, Andrew Volinsky. He's definitely one of the top lawyers in the state of New Hampshire, but he's not just a top lawyer working for the corporate interests. He's a top lawyer working for us all, particularly in defending the glory of one of the glories of America is our public education system. You can talk about Thomas Mann, you can talk about John Dewey. American education, public education, free and available to all, is one of the glories of our civilization. It needs to be defended and protected. And we'll take a quick break and we'll come right back. Okay, folks, this is the progress report for this first Wednesday in December. We've survived a big snowstorm, December 4th, and we couldn't be more pleased than to have with us Andrew Volinsky, executive counselor serving now 2 terms, but he's not going to be serving a 3rd term because he's announced he's running as a candidate for the Democratic nomination to be the next governor of the state of New Hampshire. And I hope you were able to join us for the first segment of this show when he explained, as only Andrew Volinsky can do, clearly and without any doubt about it, what our educational funding problem is in the state of New Hampshire and why we need to undertake action to do this. And it's a constitutional requirement from our state constitution that we do it. And Andrew, well, tell us a little bit about your personal life. You mentioned, you like animals.
It's an odd question. So let me just put it in context. My wife and I live in East Concord on 5 acres. We have a barn that I built. from trees on our land. We raise 3 alpacas and a cashmere goat. And my wife, who's also a lawyer, is a spinner and knitter. So
Wow.
we shear the animals in the spring. And
So when the apocalypse arrives, you're going to be pretty well
we're all
prepared.
set. But, it's funny because we pretty much waited till our children were grown and away to get the animals. But we also have some chickens and an Angora bunny. And the kids like it when they come home to visit. They live in Brooklyn and San Francisco and Denver now. So
So this is quite a switch.
yes, so we have fun with it. And up until I announced the run in October, I was still practicing law here in Manchester. I practiced in Manchester for most of my career. Started out here as a
What has the
public
rest
defender.
of your practice been like when you're not trying to rescue our educational funding system?
I do a lot of employment law, mostly representing individuals who've been mistreated, discriminated against, wrongfully terminated. An interesting part of that practice is that on more than a couple of occasions, the companies that I sued after the case was over hired me to fix their problems.
There is a very high praise right there.
It's
and
an
it's good for
interest-
them that they were willing to have their problems fixed.
I'm always a little leery that they're just trying to create a conflict, but that hasn't been the case. I've had good experience. One of those companies was Cabletron.
Yeah.
I sued them in the 90s and won a big discrimination case against them, and then was hired to figure out their employment problems. And to their credit, they listened and did not get sued again. So I'm
the other
as
hand, they've
proud
got-
of both.
They've kind of disappeared, haven't they?
Yeah, they fell apart for economic reasons,
Yeah.
but that wasn't what I was working on.
I'm sure. So now you're an announced candidate. I think there's 2 so far. There may be
Yes.
others as a candidate for governor of the state of New Hampshire. And there'll be a primary, obviously, coming up in
September, correct.
And then the general election for everybody will be in November. And why did you decide to run for governor?
Well, in part, it comes from the Claremont experience that I've described. I think I've taken that as far as I can go as an advocate.
Because
There's
it's ultimately a political problem there.
ultimately a political problem and requires, after trying as best I could for 30 years to convince insiders to deal and address the problems, I've decided that I needed to have the courage to run myself. So 4 years ago, I ran for the Executive Council to learn what I could about the operations of state government. And the Executive Council is a really important, unique body to New Hampshire. And I paid attention and learned a lot. I meet every other Wednesday with our current governor. And I tell you that we couldn't be much more different.
I can believe that.
Chris Sununu doesn't pay attention, is not trying to create opportunities for people to succeed, and looks out for special interests and his pals. And for me, the way to challenge Chris Sununu is to go directly at his conduct, make him defend the status quo, make him stand next to Trump and defend Trump's conduct.
He's apparently willing to do that.
I'm fine with that. But you're not going to outsmile him. You're not going to out-glad hand him. And that's not the approach I would take. I'm
Yeah.
pretty direct, as you
Well,
can tell.
I admire you from doing that, Andrew. I really do, because my long years of fighting the Seabrook Dragon, which
course.
you're of an age who remembers some of that at
Yep.
least. And at some point, I understood that you went as far as you could with the court cases and the litigation and Nuclear Regulatory Commission, all that. And the time came up, what are you going to do next? And I feel I really felt down on the job by not running for governor myself when that was a ripe issue. So I applaud you for seeing that you reached the end of what you can do as a very capable advocate. And there's nobody, I think, more capable in the state of New Hampshire than you are. and understanding that this is ultimately is a political issue. You have to offer yourself up. So I applaud you for that. I really,
Thank you.
really think that that's an admirable thing that you're doing. And I'm very, very in awe of this undertaking.
So let me just say, though, that although education funding is my highest priority, it's not the only challenge we
Right.
face. You know, I mentioned to you earlier, I'm a grandfather. I've got a 2-year-old grandson.
Yeah, it's
So
nice.
when I think of the environment and climate change, I'm thinking of it as a grandfather
Yep.
and worried about what I'm leaving to my grandson.
Yep,
And I think the time for half measures is gone.
yep,
I don't think we can afford to build more fossil fuel pipelines.
yep,
I think that needs to stop. I think we need to do the things that conserve energy,
yep.
because the more you save, the less you have to make.
It's our cheapest and most benign alternative.
And we're not nearly dedicated enough to that.
Oh, no, we're not.
And then the alternative fuels are appropriate places for us to look for help and more technology. But we have to be better citizens.
Yeah,
And we have to call it out when companies want to build for-profit infrastructure that just continues our heavy reliance on carbon-based fuels.
yeah.
So I try to take a lesson from what you did and Dudley did and Rennie did back in the day.
Those are some of my heroes for sure.
And you're all mine, I got to say. So that's another big issue. How we do healthcare is
Yeah.
a big issue. I spent 6 years on the board of the Manchester Community Health Center, down the hill from where we are now.
Right.
Learning from Chris McCracken how to provide good, strong preventative and primary care really to people who are challenged financially.
Yep.
And I think there are opportunities for us to grow those, they're called federally qualified health centers, so that we can do more of that around the state.
So you've made a decision, which is a very big deal in New Hampshire politics in every election cycle. You've decided not to take the pledge to veto a broad-based tax, whether sales or an income tax. You want to talk about that, why you did that, and where that leaves you in regard to these issues?
Yeah, so first, let's talk about where the pledge comes from.
Yeah.
It was Mel Thompson and Bill Loeb's creation
It was.
in the early 70s.
Yeah.
And since then, the ghosts of Thompson and Loeb have haunted every gubernatorial candidate
Yes,
that's run
they
for
have.
office. And except for Jeanne Shaheen, no one has won the governor's race without taking the pledge.
Did she not take the pledge once?
Third term did not take it, and the reason she didn't take it is because she had to deal with Claremont,
Oh.
and she wanted to put all of the options on the table.
Oh, my goodness.
It's time to take that approach again. Jeanne Shaheen
Wow.
was right.
Okay, Gene. I've been a Jeanne Shaheen fan, but I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, so not taking the pledge means I can have the discussion we just had with my little stick.
Yeah.
I can talk about taxes, and that changes the dynamic of the political race. You know, no matter what I do or what the other candidate does, the Republicans are going to call us tax and spend liberals.
Well, they've gone worse than that. They're now boasting about taxes are theft.
Right.
Taxes are theft.
How
I mean, my goodness.
silly.
How silly.
During the snow event, no one was yelling theft when the snowplows came and
Yeah,
kept the
keep
highway.
those plows out of here. They're funded with taxes.
Right.
No,
So,
not so much.
but we're going to be called names no matter what. The difference for me when I don't take the pledge is I can respond. I can say to Chris Sununu, why are you defending the heavy crushing weight of the local property tax?
Right.
Why are you offloading state responsibilities onto local taxpayers that don't have the ability to pay just to get a piece of a percentage point decrease of a business tax?
Yeah.
So putting everything on the table is what I'm about. I don't think that there's one particular solution, but I want Mitt Romney to pay his fair share. He's got a $10 million estate in Wolfboro, and his taxes on that estate are $60,000. That's a rounding error.
And
for
if
Mr.
he,
Romney.
and if he kicks the bucket, there's no inheritance tax or estate tax whatsoever that'll affect him, right?
Not, yeah, because it's all in trusts.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I mean, it's just
Not to pick
astonishing.
on Senator Romney, but the point is, we don't all contribute our fair share, and we need to make the system a whole lot more even.
Yeah, we sure do. We sure do. So let's talk about a few other things here that pertain to the gubernatorial race.
Yeah.
You're not taking the pledge, but that doesn't mean you're necessarily going to advocate for a new statewide tax of any sort, right?
No, we already have some broad-based taxes. So we have a sales tax. It's
Yeah.
called rooms and meals,
Yeah, we have an income tax called interest and dividends,
called
too,
interest and dividends,
Yeah.
and we have a statewide property tax.
which is pretty broad-based.
It's just set
Very
so
hard
low.
to miss out on that one.
Right.
And everything we don't do at the state level somehow gets funded, if at all, through the property tax at the
Right.
local level.
So we can use the levers of what we have,
Yeah,
but we have to be able to talk about it.
okay. Oh, we have a caller. That's always good. Okay. Hello, caller. You're welcome to join us on the progress report with me and Andrew Walensky. Are you there?
Yep, hello.
Hi, who's this?
I'm Robert.
Hi, Robert. Welcome.
I need some help on comprehension,
Okay.
the school funding aspect. I have in my hand the Manchester tax bill. It's $9.61 per thousand.
Yeah, we all just got it.
education.
Yep.
And then the state is charging me another $2.38 for a house that's approximate $200,000. Okay, for a total of $5,000 overall. Now my question is, if we had an ongoing lawsuit, approximate a quarter century ago, okay, and that lawsuit was won, and it states clearly that the Constitution says that it's a state function to pay for education, why aren't they doing it, and what is the stalemate, and what can we do to make it happen?
So you first or me first?
Go ahead.
All right. So thanks for your question, Robert. Here's how it works. The state claims it meets its responsibility by giving Manchester just about $4,000 in money for schools per child. The problem is Manchester, even though it's the lowest in the state, still spends about $13,000. So that per student. So you're making up that difference, that $9,000 difference, based on your local tax. That's why the $960 is on your tax bill, because you're using that to raise that missing amount of money. We did an exercise in Pittsfield where we said to the superintendent, how much of your education system could you keep if you only spent $4,000 a child? And the exercise is horrifying.
As a segue here, you know, I'm an avid watching local aspects and shows like you got here.
Okay.
And it was announced yesterday with a board of education that Manchester has lost 10,000 students that chose to go elsewhere, and I'm all for that. Let the schools, you know, the towns pay for their own. Okay, but with loss of 10,000 students, how come the cost of running the system goes up by millions on an annual basis? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
I think trying to remember how many children in the Manchester school system all in. I think it's over 30,000.
Oh, no, it's nowhere near that. I think it's around 13 or 14,000. It's been declining. The caller's quite right.
But then Manchester couldn't have lost 10,000.
Yeah.
I think it's.
I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think the figure's around 14,000.
Okay, so here's the problem with declining enrollment in our current system. Students don't leave evenly. So you can't always close an entire school when you've lost a couple of kids from one school and a couple of kids from another school. And so you maintain your infrastructure, your building costs, for example. If you have 20 kids in a classroom and it drops to 18, you're still paying the teacher and providing the teacher's benefits. So your cost structure doesn't really change.
Right.
And because everything is based on the local property tax, there's no incentive for communities to team up. So John Tobin and I were up in Berlin and did the presentation. And someone made the point, as this caller, why don't you consolidate with Gorham, Randolph, and Shelburne, the neighboring communities? And the mayor, Paul Grenier, stood up and said, who would have us? Because they're teetering on the edge of financial failure. And if they go under, the problem drags down the other communities they've teamed with. So our funding system actually works against efforts to save costs.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, Robert, you got any more you want to contribute, or is that sufficient answer for you?
Yeah, just one last one, if you would, please.
Sure.
I'm an electrician, and I keep hearing about, the fossil fuels this and the fossil fuels that. I just want to point out that my local just did a project at the Bow Generating Plant, and they spent $480 million, and we used to be spewing pollution for the last 30 years. You drive by there now, and there's a whisper of clean smoke coming right out of there. So there is such a thing as scrubbers, okay, and more of the country should invest in such a thing. And guess what? It leads to local work from the people that pour the cement to the electricians and the plumbers and the steam fitters and whatnot. And I think we ought to do that more nationwide. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well,
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you for the call. We appreciate your calling in. It helps the show. The Bow plant's an interesting thing. It's one of 2 remaining coal-fired plants in all of New England. And we all thought it probably would be closed by now. And it isn't quite, but I'm sure probably you do this when I do it. When I drive up to Concord and from Manchester a lot. And I always look over and see where that plant's operating, because it's pretty obvious when it's operating. The plume is out, and when it isn't operating, it isn't. And you don't see it operating very often. And that has nothing to do with coal per se versus anything else. It's just about the economics of the dispatch. And that plant is almost not operating. I mean, it does operate on the coldest days. I wouldn't be surprised if during this last snowstorm it was operating. But it was built to be a baseload plant to operate pretty much all the time. It's not expected to cycle off and on any more than a nuclear plant is. But now it's just an occasional dispatch, and it's the economics are pretty sour for it right now. So that's the situation, I think, up there at Bow. How long it'll continue to operate, it would be that site can be transitioned to some other use. Maybe it can be another generating facility, maybe powered by gas if there's a pipeline nearby or something else. Who knows? But I think that the end is near for the Bow plant as a coal-fired power plant. So that's my comment on that. What's going to be your energy policy as governor?
So I think you start out by dealing with problems by naming them. And we don't have an agency focused on coordinating our energy efforts.
Aha! But I am chairing a commission to establish a Department of Energy for the state of New Hampshire.
So you
Which
let me know when you get your commission.
It's up and running. I missed it today because I had to be somewhere else. But,
No, the department, I mean.
the department, yeah. Well,
You
that'll
let me know when you get your department.
Yeah, and you can make some great appointments to staff it
Well,
and
except
head it.
I'm not going to wait for you
Okay.
because there is currently the Office of Strategic Initiatives
Yeah.
that the governor uses for miscellaneous functions.
Yes, he does.
One of its functions, legitimately, is receiving federal weatherization money.
Yeah.
If I'm elected governor, one of my first acts is going to be to rename it the Agency for Climate and the Environment, and it will coordinate the efforts of the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission,
Yeah.
Environmental Services, the Department of Education and the Department of Transportation as they relate to energy and climate change.
I certainly applaud that, because right now we have no agency in government which has energy in its title, and it's time that we did. So let me just move on, Andrew, to a couple of issues that have come up while you've been an executive counselor,
Sure.
and let you speak to them.
Of course.
One is the controversial appointment of Gordon MacDonald to be was it Chief Justice or Justice?
Chief Justice.
Chief Justice in the New Hampshire Supreme Court.
Right.
He seemed to be in every way qualified, and yet he went down on a very partisan vote, 3-2 in the Executive Council. You're one of the three. Why do you think he did not deserve to be Chief Justice?
So as you know, and maybe not all your followers know, the Chief Justice is the head of the New Hampshire court system. And he or she sits on the New Hampshire Supreme Court, which is our only appellate court.
That's true.
Okay? Gordon MacDonald has never been a judge. Period. End of sentence. Gordon MacDonald has never tried a jury trial. 3/4 of the appellate cases that our Supreme Court sees are jury trial decisions that are then appealed.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't have the relevant experience, and Gordon has a 30-year documented history of opposing women's reproductive rights.
Mm-hmm.
He is a very partisan guy. I happen to like Gordon. I know him from practicing law, but he is as partisan as they get, and I want people on our bench that are neutral, that go with the facts, that follow the law, and that don't tell me over and over again, I'll just do what the law says when I ask questions about areas of law that we know Trump and Gorsuch and Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court are trying to obliterate.
Right.
And
Okay.
so that is not much of a salve to me.
Okay. Very good.
But you should also, just one last mention, the vote against Gordon MacDonald, I don't agree was partisan. I thought it was based on real reasons.
Okay.
But that was the middle of July.
Mm-hmm.
Sununu has refused to bring forward another nominee
Really?
and has refused to talk to the counselors about who might be acceptable nominees.
Mm-hmm.
And despite that, Councilor Pignatelli from Nashua and I have suggested some names and have heard no response.
Hmm.
So there's a chief judge of our trial court, Tina Nato, and
Yep.
there's a chief judge of our circuit court, David King.
Yep.
They both are capable judges with lots of experience. We recommended both of their names and have not heard any
I
response.
think they would, either one would be an outstanding choice. All right, we have another call. Hello, caller. You're on the progress report with Bob Backus and Andrew Valinsky. You happy to have you participate? Have you got a question or a comment?
Hi, Bob. This is Tony Sapienza. I'm a longtime viewer, and I seldom call,
Well,
if ever. And
Well, we're glad you're calling tonight.
well, I'm thrilled with your show. Thank you for being there. I really appreciate your service, and I miss my buddy Mike.
Me too.
But the number one reason I'm calling tonight is because I am thrilled to go into the voting booth and vote for Mr. Valinsky. And I'm thrilled to do that, and thank you very much for running. I've been watching this guy for years, and I'm just thrilled to go into that booth and vote for you. I want you to know that.
Tony, thank you.
And but you know, we differ on a couple of things. Or maybe it's only one thing, energy. But I'm dying to get that gas pipeline from the coast because I heat my house with gas, and I really want that granite pipeline, whatever they call it.
Granite Bridge, I think.
Yeah, I really want that pipeline. That's jobs, and it's natural gas, and that's great for the community. It's great for Manchester. And I'm still going to go in that booth and vote for you, Mr. Valinsky, because I'm telling you, I've been watching you for years, and that's not going to that difference is not going to cost you my vote.
Thank you, Tony. And we can respectfully disagree.
You were talking about Merrimack Station.
Yeah.
There's good jobs there. People are making a good living. We're supporting communities. And, when you drive up 93 and you see that plant operating, if that plant wasn't there, people would be either freezing or sweating. And old people would be dying in the summer because they don't have air conditioning. One of the reasons our lifespan is so long these days is because we have air conditioning for old people in the summer. Now, you guys are old enough to remember when we didn't have air conditioning.
Yeah.
And we didn't have so many old people. So you need the electricity for that. So remember that.
All right.
Those are good jobs that are saving people's lives. So
Thank you.
Bob, for your show.
And thank you for calling, Tony. I love it when you call in. It's a great call. Thank you.
I'm excited to vote for you, Mr. Volinsky. So
Thank you,
hang in
Tony.
there.
Take good care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, the Sapienza family, a real force here in the city of Manchester.
Yes.
There's more than one of them.
Yes.
We're happy to hear from Tony. It's interesting. I've been around on the energy business so long. There was a time when I was first involved in the energy business with the issue of Seabrook, and we actually peaked in the winter. That was the peak time. But air conditioning has come on. Now the summer is the peak.
It is the peak.
Demand on our electric system. So that's kind of interesting. And the way that's gone, and it's something about what's happening with our climate, too, I think, that's the way it is. But anyway, that's a very interesting thing. One other thing I wanted to mention to you, Andrew, because you've made the news in a number of ways. Almost all of them are for really good reasons. But the issue of the liquor department sting, which, I never could understand why anybody had a problem with that. You went in and saw people paying incredible amounts in cash to buy liquor.
Yeah.
What was the concern about that, and what happened to that?
So the concern was raised by liquor store employees. They were handling tens of thousands of dollars in cash at a time. And the Liquor Commission was telling them just to take the money to the local bank without any kind of security and just throw an overcoat on so it wasn't obvious that they were liquor employees, even though they were leaving the liquor store with a paper bag full of cash. And so that's what raised the issue. And the State Employees Union asked me if I could encourage the Liquor Commission to get a security company. And then I started to hear the explanation, and I've done white-collar criminal law, and I know that if you transact business in cash and you spend more than $10,000, you have to report that to the IRS.
That's right.
As the retailer.
Yeah, isn't something you take more than $10,000 out of a federally insured bank institution?
Banks have to report it as
They
well.
have to report it, yeah.
And further, it's a crime to structure your transaction so that you break up a $10,000 transaction to a $9,000 and a $1,000 in order to avoid the law. And the law is in place for good reasons. It's to deal with drug trafficking. It's part of the Patriot Act because you follow the money. And so I'm listening to this, and I heard that frequently our border liquor stores were being visited by people from New York who would buy $20,000 and $30,000 of liquor and break it up into $9,000 cash sales. And, I kept hearing it, and I wasn't getting many more details than that. And I finally said to the State Employees Union, if you want me to do something about this, I should see it. And so they told me it's open. The bootleggers, as they call them, call ahead. We put together pallets of liquor for them, and then they come pay us in cash. And so the next time we get a telephone order, we'll tell you, and you can come and look at it.
Okay.
And so I
I
went.
thought you just happened to be there. But
No,
this
so I was invited to Keene to watch a particular bootlegger come and buys booze. And for some reason, he was late. And while I'm waiting, another bootlegger called and said, I'm an hour out, put together this order for me, and I'll come pick it up. So I stood in the aisle on a Saturday morning and watched this couple come in. He hands the guy hands the woman half his cash, and they split the order up at the cash register. And it was over $20,000.
Wow.
And I wrote a report, a description of it, and gave it to the Attorney General and copied the governor on it. You know what the governor did? Governor waited till I left the building after a council meeting and asked that I be investigated for reporting the Liquor
My
Commission.
goodness.
Didn't have the courage to raise it directly to me. And the Attorney General's office, appointed by the governor, has done basically nothing with it.
So there's something there for you to do when you're governor.
We have
Maybe.
6% of our budget comes from liquor sales,
Yeah.
and it is not a competently run business,
Oh, goodness.
aside from this issue.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
So that's the little story. And I mentioned to you, weekly photos from people across the state of these bootleg sales, people loading cases of usually
Yeah.
Hennessy cognac.
Well, as
into
they
their
say,
cars.
follow the money, see where it goes.
That's right.
So tell us a little about your campaign. You're off and running. How can people help you out? Where would you like to have people go to
Thank you.
find out about what you're doing and contribute?
So we announced our campaign late. We've only been up and running for about 4.5 weeks. During that time, we've had a great response. We did a campaign video that's had over 200,000 views. People can see it at our website, which is volinskynh.com. People can contribute through the website as well. We're talking broadly to people around the state about the issues that affect them, how to create better opportunity, how to move our state forward, how to preserve the things we all love about our state. Amy, my wife, and I have lived here for more than 37 years. It's a place we care deeply about, and we'd like to see it do well.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's been terrific to have you here, Andrew.
Thank you for the invitation.
This has been a really, and we'll have to have you back because we got a ways to go till next November. So
Deal.
we can definitely have you back. And I want to thank our callers. We had a couple of terrific callers tonight. So that's a good thing too. And I'll be back next week with Mike Farley. He'll be right here. And I can't remember right now. We do have a guest book, but we don't. I'll have to post that up for you as we go along because that is mainly something Mike's doing. And I have to say, you're a terrific asset to the state of New Hampshire, and really proud
Means
that
a
you're
lot.
here. I really, really appreciate what you're doing and have done and will do because it's a lot yet to come. Okay, folks, that's
Thank
it
you.
for this week. Take care.